This is a painting of Dante on the wall of the Cathedral of Florence. So that's very, very nice. That's a nice way for us to start. And we're going to see this during our weeks together because it sums up him, his place in the world as a Florentine. That's Florence right next to him. And, of course, his poem, which is a poem about a journey into the afterworld in 3 parts: the journey into the Inferno, the journey into Purgatory, and the journey into heaven. So our painting gives us a sort of introduction to all 3 of the journeys. The journey down into Inferno is over on the left side there, and those people are very unhappy that they're down there. But don't worry, you won't be there, so don't worry about that. And in the middle is the mountain of Purgatory, where he begins the journey up through the mountain, up to the top, back to the innocence of Adam and Eve at the top of the mountain, and then into the heavens. That's the rest of the painting up at the top. So that's our image. That's our image of Dante in the cathedral, in the Duomo. And we want to put his picture up and this picture that your professor made today. He's very proud of this. This picture of Dante in the middle with the Greeks over on the left, the Parthenon, and modern 21st century America. That's the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum edition. On the right side of the picture is a way of saying to us here in our class and on the web, and to all you folks at home, that Dante is the man in the middle. Now, what do we mean? In this long story that we're studying together over 30 weeks, starting back at 3000 BC with Sumeria and Abraham, and then Troy and the Iliad, in this long, long journey, the place at which stands Dante is a kind of midpoint, a midway, a middle spot in this long story. It's the Middle Ages, so of course it's in the middle. It's the Middle Ages. And what Dante does for us as a subject of our class and as a subject of our lectures is to give us the opportunity to think about the moment in the middle when Western civilization is at a instant of great expansion, creativity, looking back to the ancient world. So looking back to the Greeks. And Dante knows the Greeks and includes them in his poem. So the Greeks, Homer, Virgil, and all of the other great and famous figures are going to be included in the poem. So Dante knows that that should be part of his vision. On the other side, there's the modern side. And Dante is already living in aspects of modern civilization. So that's why we call him the man in the middle. That's why we can see in him a sort of magic moment, a punctuation, an instant when a person, an individual, a poet, a writer, looks back to the Greeks and forward to us. Now, he didn't know us, he doesn't know us, but he knows some things that are modern. He knows some things that are like us. Oh, so for example, I'll give you one example. Would you like one example? Yes, right. I knew you were going to ask me. Cities, big cities, busy cities, packed, busy cities. We all know about it. We all live in them, around them. If you're in downtown San Francisco, you know exactly what city life is exactly like. So, many different things about Dante includes a look back to the Greeks, all the way back to the Greeks, the Jews, the Christians, and forward to modern times. Now, there's another thing about Dante, and you see at the bottom, the man with the book. So we have 2 things here in this opening picture. One, we have him reaching all the way back to ancient history and all the way forward to modern times in many ways. And, as you can see, in the middle of the painting, he stands with a book. He stands with a book. Now, You can't think of Dante without his book. I mean, that's why he's famous. That's why he's what he is. That's why he's adored and loved, and that's why books come out about him all the time, and they do. New books are published every year about Dante. And if you just want some, go to the syllabus, go to the website this week, and there's some suggestions. There's a nice one-volume biography. But the most important thing is about Dante and a book, his book, but also the very idea of the book. Now, we already talked about this when we were back talking about the Romans, and when we talked about Julius Caesar and Cicero, and then Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We said we were entering the age of the book, and we were. It's true that the look of a book in 100 AD was a scroll, was a papyrus scroll, and now in Dante's time, it's much more likely to be a codex, a bound volume, hand-copied manuscript, but it looks more like our books. And for Dante, and for the nature of his achievement, and for the figure of Dante in history, and for the way we think about him, the most important thing is the very idea of a book and the relationship between books and Western civilization and Dante. He gives us a book that is encyclopedic. It is a book that is trying to include the whole world. Everything in his world, everything in Italy, everything in Europe, everything all the way back to the Greeks, everything all the way back to Abraham. It's all in his book, or he hoped. He wanted it to be encyclopedic. And therefore, he, and that picture that we're looking at, reminds us of how important the book, the actual copied book, the book that people could own, was to Western civilization, and how important it still is. It still is important. Now, one thing about Dante and this book that will be interesting to you is that there were more manuscript copies that survived from his time, from the 1320s, than any other book except the Bible. So of all the things that could be copied many, many times in the classical world, this is the one that there are more copies of than anything else. So that tells you how important this was in the 1300s and how important it will continue to be in the 1400s and into the 1500s. So two things: man in the middle of the temporal, the old, the new, the Greek, the future, and the writer, the man of the book. Now, there's another thing about him. Italy. We know that in our last few weeks we've been talking about France. And so tonight we change our focus, we move. And as we do that, we want to ask, well, why? Why are we leaving London, England, France, Paris, and now coming down to Italy? What exactly is happening? Why does Italy become important? And that's what we will talk about. But also, what about Dante and Italy? And as you can see in our picture here, Dante is in Italy, and Italy is in the middle of the Mediterranean. So at this moment, 1300, the position of Italy, right in the middle of the Mediterranean, is a huge advantage. Many, many things are happening that funnel in and make Italy more important than any other place in Europe at this moment. That's the first thing. The second thing is that within Italy, Florence emerges as the most creative center of any place in the peninsula at this moment. So not only is Italy important, but Florence, the city, is important. And in our second part tonight, we're going to go and we're going to walk right through the streets of Dante's neighborhood. So you'll all know where he came from. You'll all have a very good sense of where he came from in part two. So Italy, Florence, and then Dante. Dante is a Florentine. Dante is born in Florence, grows in Florence, lives in Florence. His house is still there. We're going to see it. And everything about him and his poem and his images and the characters in the poem are connected to Florence. And Florence is in the middle of Italy, and Italy is in the middle of the Mediterranean. In other words, in the very, very middle of the most progressive, the most creative, the most exciting place in in the world, Now, here is our author, and here is our Greek temple and our modern museum, and the opening line of the poem, Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita. That's the opening line, one of the most famous lines in all of poetry. And what it means is, in the middle of the road of our life, nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita. And you can see by that opening line that the poem is about one's life at the middle. So the whole poem is about being in the middle of your life, being in the middle of the road of your life. So the poem is about all of our experience of coming to the middle of the road of life. The man who's writing the poem is living in the city that's in the middle of the peninsula, and the peninsula is in the middle of the Mediterranean, in the middle of the European world, and therefore brings us back to the man in the middle.